Hi, welcome to Revive Ministries Podcast. This month, it's kind of weird because a year ago, this theme is "It's okay to fall." If anyone thinks about October 2020 and where we were at, a lot of us wouldn't say it was okay to fall, but I think sometimes when we look at success and um, how it looks in our lives, it's usually it's probably usually held on to someone else or only if statements. A lot of times we don't look at to ourselves what our successes for ourselves mean. And I think that's sometimes those are the lessons that we miss out on when we do have those moments of um, trials and tribulations. Today I have a new guest, Gina Dobson, coming here to share insight. She also has a book, and I'm very excited to have her here. I just want to welcome her. Thank you, Gina, for
Thank
joining
you.
us, and thank you for being a part of this. A lot of times, I think it's always important to talk about this in a safe space, and I'm just always encouraged to hear other people inspired as much as me to share the
Yeah.
hope that's out there.
Yes, and I appreciate being here. I want to congratulate you for your podcast. It's so interesting that during the quarantine, how podcasts just birthed out of
Yeah,
people, and there's so much to say, and the voice it's giving voice to the voiceless. And so I appreciate and I love today's topic. I've watched some of your shows on the internet as well, and so I think that you are really dismantling shame and you're evoking agency in people to come forward and just to kind of speak about the things that they've gone through without feeling that there has to be perfection. And so I love the feeling of it's okay to fall and being able to unpack what that looks like in real time.
thank you, Gina. I always, I never minimize any of my guests coming in because, it's easier not to talk about these things than to talk about them a lot of times. But I feel it
Yes.
also doesn't. It kind of, we miss an opportunity of healing. I want to share with those who are listening all over the world, but in the U.S., if you're in crisis, the 1-800-273-8255 is a national suicide prevention lifeline. I also know there's a text line too. I don't have it up, but I'll put it in the notes. But wherever you are in the world, I want to encourage you to find what resources are out there. Um, Sometimes, when we're at the lowest point, we may think that these permanent solutions will help, but honestly, sometimes it's just thinking about finding the help, finding that safe place where you could share. Interestingly enough, you talk about podcasts. A lot of people kind of grew out of this whole COVID thing, and I feel it's really because a lot of us don't feel like we're heard. I do enough groups
Right.
in NAMI. I'm a facilitator, and one of the biggest complaints is not being heard. Uh, you know,
Hmm.
and I think recovery and healing is a process, and sometimes we try to skip steps, and I feel we miss out on lessons when we skip steps, and that's where we're going
Yes.
on with this idea of it's okay to fall. I always start off with a quote, and this is from Winston Churchill, and he says, success is not final, failure is not fatal, it is the courage to continue that counts." What comes to mind,
Mm.
Gina? Like, I just kind of throw it out there for a thought kind of exercise for both of our parts. But anyway, what comes to mind when you see this quote?
Two words: fail forward.
Fail forward. Yes. Eh,
Yeah, like fall forward. That was the last cliche, but really fail forward because I believe and I love what you just said that if you miss the important steps, you're not going to get the lesson. I'm a teacher. And so when I put, so you're talking to the
yeah.
choir right here.
Yeah.
When I assemble my lesson plans, I don't just have a goal and expect the kids to get the concept in one day and give them the test.
Mm-hmm.
I expect that when I write my lesson plan, I even filter in that lesson plan the possibility that they won't understand the lesson. So then I
Mm-hmm.
incorporate brass tacks, apparatus that I use, like maybe using video. because I'm an
Mhm.
ELA teacher, to break down the topical matter. I also incorporate, okay, I'm going to have the kids work in cooperative grouping after I teach it so that it's not all me didactically given the curriculum. I'm going to incorporate my assistant in my classroom, which is the instructional paraprofessional. And
Mhm.
then I'm going to launch maybe a quiz after I myself have assessed by their facial gestures whether or not they can handle the test. So I'll have a quiz maybe 2 weeks after I've taught the lesson. And so, in other words, I'm expecting that it's not going to come easy. And that's where
Yeah.
we are as adults. It's not
Mhm.
going to be easy. COVID-19, who knew that in the middle of March last year, the
Mhm.
world would be shut down?
Yeah.
So, but in a lot of us, including myself, there were things that we failed miserably in. Maybe
Yeah.
even not masking up as much as we should have, but we failed forward, and here we are now. The world is open, and you and I are talking. So, failure is, I think, a prerequisite for being a success.
I think that's very true, and also you talked about being a teacher. I remember Benjamin Franklin said, "Tell me, I'll forget. Teach me, I may remember. Involve me, I learn." And I feel like a lot of us need to involve
Mm,
the people around us. And the only way that really works, especially with some, I have church members who are young people, and it's easy to get discouraged nowadays, especially how the world has
absolutely.
changed. How do we socialize in a way that even makes sense? Now things are kind of opening, but still the world has changed, and like
Yes, it has.
at the perspective of how we look at things. And I like how you say failing forward, because sometimes failing is something we as society seek to avoid in hopes for success. And like you
Right,
said, it's kind of like the opposite. You have to go through failures to get to that marginal success, because it sticks, it's sustainable, it's not like brittle, it doesn't go away so easily. I learn best when I just kind of I'm kind of bold whenever I'm learning something new. I just kind of
uh-huh,
I could get all the red marks on my thing, whatever I'm trying to do, and I'll just try to learn, and I'll do it again. And if I do
right.
more red, there's a little bit less red marks. I keep going. For me, I'm a glutton for punishment in some ways, but I just like
Same.
to. I like to learn. I like to learn, not just to get it right 100% the first time, not knowing how it happened. I like to know how it
Right.
happened, and what how to keep that. So I think
Yes, yes. I bet you'd make for a great philosopher.
I
To
some
know
people,
thyself.
one person said, I don't know, one person said, I remember I said this to one of my friends, you know there's a lot of smart people in the world, and they know, like,
Mhm.
you know I could say truth or the right thing to say, but the wise people know when to say
Ah, yeah,
it.
and absolutely, and those are the ones running the world. Let me say that.
Yes. Nelson Mandela is one of my. I love his quotes, some of them, and one of them he says, "Do not judge me by my successes. Judge me by how many times I fell down and got back up." It's easy to kind of point especially in recovery. I don't know how. There's this
Mhm.
there's this portion right after you kind of feel better, and it doesn't always happen, especially in substance use. You kind of say, I'm never going to be around that, and you're kind of really bitter to the ones who are still struggling. And I feel that that's a disjustice, because you want to get to the point where, like, helping people right now, and with this podcast, has been a big healing thing for me. Has been extremely
Yeah,
healing. Recovery
yeah.
really was just serving others. So I want to get to the point. I want to hear more about you, obviously, and I want to hear about your story and your book. I believe it's Scapegoat, and I want to also all the info for that book and everything else that you're doing will be in the notes for those listening. But I want to hear about you, Gina. What's your story and what's your book? Why did you what prompted you to write the book? And yeah, whatever you feel like sharing with those listening, now's the time.
Okay, so pun intended, my life is an open book. So honestly, I heard from the Holy Spirit. I am a Christian, and I was on my couch. I had just lost my job in 2012, and it was due to racism, plain and simply put. And I
Mm,
don't use that terminology, just willy nilly. But this was a very well documented case of racism. I never followed up with it. I just went on with it because I believe that you reap what you sow, and they did. So that's what
mm,
happened. 2013, I'm sitting on my couch out of work, and the Holy Spirit says, I want you to write a book.
mhm,
I said, on what? He said, scapegoating. And
mhm,
I intuitively knew what that meant, but I thought, let me just go to the dictionary and look it up.
mhm,
So I looked it up. It aligned with what God was telling me. Literally, I
mhm,
started going to the library every day for 7 weeks. I didn't have a computer at the time. That's another story for another time.
mhm,
And I went to use their computer. In 7 weeks, my manuscript was written.
mhm,
The interesting part was I wouldn't publish it for 8 years because what the Lord wanted me to do was
mhm,
sit on it, which I didn't know then. I thought it was, oh, I need editors and I have the money. No, He wanted me to sit on the manuscript and allow things to happen in the world so that I could put that in the book.
mhm.
So when I published it in October, my ebook, I knew just unequivocally that that was the time that it needed to be published. And I tell you, especially in light of things that were happening politically, it was the period behind all the statements that I was making in the book. So it was a perfect time. And I have been getting a lot of feedback on it, people that have purchased it, and they're saying, oh my gosh, I didn't even think scapegoating was a thing until I read your book. So I know that it was the hand of God on that.
I think that's, we never use the word scapegoating. You hear that often in our normal talk or verbiage. I just remember, biblically, you go and, you talk about the sanctuary, you have the scapegoat, when back in the Old Testament, they had the scapegoat. But when it comes to scapegoat, it really is putting blame on someone else,
Right.
obviously Revive Ministry doesn't proselytize, but I remember even the first story with Adam and Eve, and Adam, they sin, and then Eve says, and then God comes. And the interesting thing about that is kind of like how we are as humans. What's the first
Right.
thing that they do? They hide, and then when they get
Right.
caught, they blame each other. And like for I always wonder, and this is a thought exercise even for myself, what would have
Mm-hmm.
happened if Adam would have said, no, I did it, it's fine? Like, what would have happened if selfishness wasn't there? Obviously, when we read biblically, that kind of translated later on, but you kind of see the theme of the selfishness and not outward centeredness. It's not about
Right.
how I look, how pristine I look. It's about being that teacher and mentor, and what you learn, you pass on to those around you. Honestly, I think the best teachers, at least I try to be a good mentor to those younger than me, is just, I
Right.
want them to be better than me. I want them to be better than me. Like, it's not
Right.
about um accolades and titles. I think we get caught up in that. We get scared. COVID made
Right.
us scared. Let's just be honest. Made us
Yes.
scared because there's a
Absolutely.
lot of uncertainty. We're not used to this
Yes.
level of uncertainty in a global scale, but at the same time, I feel that when you're able to kind of understand and then understand that uncertainty is inevitable, change
Mm-hmm.
is inevitable, but growth is
Yes.
optional. Growth is optional. That's
Oh,
from John Maxwell. I like, I just for me, I just love the idea of, like, when we kind of look at failures and how we look at, we were talking about scapegoating, and we look at how we perceive ourselves and others. It really
mm-hmm.
kind of kind of sees where we're at. So scapegoating for me, when I think of that word, and I'm going to get back to you, is it stems from a lot of fear from my experience. If I'm afraid so much, I'm going to push that on someone else, because for me,
Absolutely.
I'm trying to protect myself. Self-preservation is everything, but when you're trying to save something, a lot of times you lost it already at that point. So
Yeah.
anyway, and you think, and I found that very interesting. To sit on things. A lot of times when I write, or I'm thinking about even a topic or a theme for a month, because I do monthly themes of Revive. I just sit on it. I sit on it. A lot of times that does
Right.
help, because at the moment you'll be excited, but
Right.
I think patience can give you more foresight. Um,
Mm,
yeah. So when
understood.
you think of it's okay to fall, and you think about recovery. I know a lot of people talk about mental health. Mental health awareness month was in May.
Yes.
And there's a lot of these months and like remembering and tributes, and it's funny. You look at the
Mm-hmm.
calendar, we're so bad at remembering. It's funny how much we're so bad, because we have to remember these things. You would think we make mental health so complicated,
Right.
because we're like, oh, it's this and only this, but really it's about the people. It's about the people.
Right.
That's why we care. It's not about
Right.
some arbitrary. It's interesting when there's new research and stuff like that, but I don't know what your experience. I want to hear from you. Is it's no cookie cutter approach. A person
No, there isn't.
comes from a church who's struggling. I'm not going to tell them to do something they never used to or not comfortable. I'm going to tell them to do
Mm-hmm.
what I'm going to kind of encourage them to do what has helped, what worked and what doesn't.
Right.
Simple questions: what worked and what
Right.
doesn't. You may need professional help, and that's okay. It's okay to not be
Right.
okay. And
Absolutely.
so, what are your
Absolutely.
thoughts on purpose-driven recovery and a safe place? Those two things usually don't talk about, but I've been pushing it a lot, especially with the safe place model. In these failure lessons that we're trying to embrace as a society, I think there's a lot of pressure to be perfect. There's a lot of pressure to be busy, and I'll let you kind of go ahead.
Yeah, so I like that you talked about the fact that there's fear, which is why people don't take responsibility. And what I took from that, just in my ADHD mind, I went all over the place when you were saying that, is that fear can be the impetus for shame, and
Mm-hmm.
then shame can be the impetus for blame.
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of times, if we're not just real with who we are, and irrespective to what I call respectability politics, whatever people think, if I feel like I made a mistake, I
Mm-hmm.
should not have to worry about being buried in guilt
Yeah.
and contention from other people that what I do is now the totality of how people perceive me. And so
Yeah.
I think with purpose driven recovery, I think it's about being intentional to just slough off all of the respectability politics and look at the person within who's trying to heal, that being you or myself, and saying, I got to get well for me, because there's work that I have to do, and that's why I have to show up in this world fully as I am and take up space where I'm assigned to. And so the safe place model, I think the failure for the lesson is perfect, because scripture says we all sin and fall short of the glory of God,
Mm-hmm.
right? And then there's other scripture that says the just man gets up, it falls down 7 times, but he gets up. So
Mm-hmm.
as a Christian, that is what promotes my level of agency, that I'm able to reclaim who I am by allowing myself to fail but getting up, because of the grace that is extended to me. Now, those that aren't saved, I mean, I can't, we're in a multiple space of religion. I get it. I'm okay with it. Whatever it is that allows you agency, that allows you to have your own power, you don't have to get power and affirmation from someone else, because the
Mm.
person that's affirming you, they don't even know who they are 9 times out of 10.
Yeah.
And a lot of times they minimize you to bring equity to who they are. And
Yeah.
that's what, I call them culture vultures. And so I
Yeah.
think it's the purpose driven recovery is super important. And also, I want to say, those that get professional help,
Mm.
make sure that you're not getting help from people. I was just talking about this with someone else the other day, that they had a counselor who ended up re-traumatizing them
Yeah.
because they were judging them during the counseling session. So
Yeah.
ultimately, it's you and God, universe, whatever it is. For me, it's God. But make sure that it's you and something bigger versus mere mortals who have no more power than you do.
Yeah, I know, and I feel for me, and the way I digest it, especially, we talk about change being inevitable. That doesn't just go with events; it goes with people. There's seasons of
Right.
life, and the one thing that's comforting, at the very minimum, if those listening who are like, I don't believe in those stuff. In my the one thing about God in my context, my personal experience, is that God doesn't change,
Mhm.
and that's comforting in the world
Absolutely.
that ought
Absolutely.
that in the world that always changes. So at the very
Right.
little, like, I know someone who, one of my friends, she struggles with substance use, and she said
Hmm.
that at the very least, this is what she said, and I'll kind of lead to a little short story from she said, if not picking up a bottle was all, it was everything about my recovery, what's the point? Like, literally, what was the point? If it was just not picking up the bottle and
Hmm.
that was it, that's where purpose-driven recovery. For me, I know those people because I'm a leader in church, and I know certain people don't go to church for different reasons because they've been hurt. Let's be honest. Uh,
Right.
People are people. You
Absolutely.
talk about therapy. People are people. So hearing that that person was re-traumatized, it doesn't surprise me, because that's when you are a active participant in your recovery, you can kind of see where it is. You could say no if
Yep.
certain things not helping, and that's okay. Just because someone has a
Right.
title or profession doesn't, you have the choice to say no, it's not working, or
Right.
you get questions. So for me, it's all of that and above. And you talk about, we're talking about, going back, we talk about failure is, and Albert Einstein, I love Albert Einstein, says failure is success in progress. And I think that's
Yeah.
amazing. Albert Einstein had a lot of good things to say, and for me, I kind of, um, when I think about, I read a book from Viktor Frankl, and that kind of changed. It was Man Finding Meaning, and to paraphrase, because he says he was in Auschwitz. He was a Jewish person in Auschwitz,
Hmm.
he said, and he was a psychiatrist, and he said the people who survived had a why. They had a why, because it doesn't make the how
Mm.
it doesn't make the how easier, but it makes the how bearable. And that's when I talk about purpose driven recovery at the very extreme of it. Because if everything kind of, like, if you have a Job moment in your life, everything seems to kind of fall down, but you have to have that why. It's not, doesn't make your life easier, but you kind of have a purpose driven
Right.
recovery towards something. I feel that has been helpful in my own life, and I've seen it help in other people's. And like I said, it's different for everyone. Everyone's recovery and journey is different, but when it comes to falling and failing, I feel that has been very helpful. I want to kind of ask you, Gina, any final thoughts? This has been incredible just to talk to you, even just for a short bit. All the information about your book and anything else that you're doing, I will put it in the notes. But any final thoughts you want to share with those listening today? Anything you want to just share as we close?
Just get up again. You have,
Just,
and I will say this, I wanted to piggyback on what you were talking about prior to this question. Is like you have to have that laser like focus, is what I call it. I
mm-hmm,
believe that's why people have vision boards,
mm-hmm,
because they have to lay out something and dream a bigger dream than they
mm-hmm,
could ever imagine, because they feel like it can align with a greater purpose. My final thoughts is just do not castigate yourself. Just tune out. I know it's hard to do because we
mm-hmm,
live in society where we're bombarded with images of success, beauty,
mm-hmm.
attainment of wealth, but we almost have to go countercultural in order to see the bigger picture. So
Yeah,
hang with people like yourself that have goals but are not willing to die for them, like willing to suffer and get sick and do all the things that you think society wants you to prevail in. You have to do it because, to your point, Robert, you have to see light at the end of the tunnel. People are assigned to your voice. What is your passion? What
yeah.
is your purpose? What is
Mm-hmm.
it that gets you up in the morning? If
Yeah.
I gave you $10 million, what business would you open up? And don't
Yeah.
put money in as the impetus. What is it that you want the world to see? And that is the focus that you need. And expect to fail forward, but that's going to set you up for success. I also want to plug my book, Stop
Mm-hmm.
Scapegoat No More, because it's for people who have been scapegoated in
Mm-hmm.
society, that are feeling that they are being blamed for the failures of others. So definitely pick that up. Amazon has print, and ebooks are at Barnes and Noble or anywhere books are sold.
Thank you so much, Gina. I also want to share, real quick, one of my favorite writers that I used to read. It was he wrote the "From Whom the Bell Tolls." I'm having a moment right now, but anyway, it was "Farewell to Arms," and those listening will know what I'm talking about. He was in World War I. He lived in Florida most of his life. What am I drawing a blank? It's okay. It's okay.
That's okay. It's
Yeah. But anyway,
yeah.
there was this one moment where, because I'm a veteran myself, and the guy saw in the book, he's like, how important is that person? It's a conversation. How important is the person in your foxhole with you? It says more important than the war itself. And I feel,
Mm,
those who, like, I was not in infantry. I was not in combat. My brother and some of my peers have been, but I think a lot of us can relate to that. It's about who's next to you.
right.
Who's a lot of noise happens around us. A lot of change
Right.
happens around us, but
Absolutely.
it's really important what safe place. What There's a difference between the house and the home. Are you building a
Right.
home, or are you just bounding a lot of space? So, and
Luther
that,
Vandross said that.
yeah.
If you're old school R&B, Luther Vandross killed that song.
Oh, it's funny because I remember I'll just plug this. My grandfather passed away like 4 years ago, and
Oh,
I'm I'm half Korean, so it's required that I do
okay.
karaoke. And it's one of those things. And I sang "Boys to Men," and I'm like 8 years old or 10 years old, horribly. But that's a little note for those listening. But that I failed, but I'm still here. I'm just joking. But
You're
anyway,
still
thank
here. So we want a reboot of that song next interview, the reboot.
Okay. Anyway, thank you so much for being guest with us today. Uh,
My privilege.
um, all the information of the book will be in the notes, and I just wanted to share it with those to stay updated with Revive Ministries through the various platforms. ReviveMinistriesFL.com is our website. This is goodbye from Revive Ministries, leaving with the last quote, and it says, Ralph Waldo Emerson: "The greatest glory in living lies in not never failing, but rising every time we fall."
Mm, beautiful. So true.